Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
My Weird Prompts is an AI-generated podcast produced by Daniel Rosehill, a verified human with documentation to prove it. While every effort is made to ensure our AI hosts draw from credible sources and run on cutting-edge models, they do occasionally make things up with alarming confidence. As with everything in life, and especially this podcast, treat all claims as spurious until confirmed to be not. Daniel, Herman and Korn accept no responsibility for any decisions made based on the confident ramblings of our artificial presenters. Now, today's episode.
Hello there, Herman and Korn. So like a lot of people very interested in AI, I'm a customer of OpenRouter, which for those who haven't heard of it is a model aggregator. And what that means effectively is that rather than having connecting to different APIs to use different models from different providers, you can keep a balance with OpenRouter, and it can do a lot of very interesting things. One of them is there's that reason for it. It makes it as simple as changing a single parameter in a code base if you want to use a completely different large language model for your AI application. The second reason is that it also supports this kind of very nifty routing logic by which it'll kind of automatically select which model is best for your prompt and send it to that. So there's a few different reasons why it's very popular, and there's a few other services that are like OpenRouter. But one of the uses that I particularly like making of it is that it provides a very interesting perspective into the breadth of AI models that are actually being generated. And there's different worlds. One of the worlds is generative AI, where you've got, like on Replicate, a whole bunch of models for just about any kind of thing you can imagine, ranging from 3D to video, image to 3D. But even just sticking with what OpenRouter does, which is much more biased towards the large language models, using them as the kind of brains of an AI application, you have a surprisingly large selection. Looking at the list at the moment, for example, you have Alan AI, which is a free model that I think is interested in keeping AI affordable and that there's some way to access it for basically everyone. Then you have these Chinese models that Zed AI is gaining a lot of traction and is very interesting for its reasoning capabilities. And then you have these other ones, which I don't know how I would kind of describe them, but maybe kind of the less famous large language models. I'm looking at one, Amazon Nova 2 Lite, as an example. Now, you don't really hear much in the media about Amazon Nova ever as a model. And in the same category as that, I would kind of put maybe, Grok is a little bit more specialist than the mainstream ones. But you also have another example is some of the Qwen models, Liquid AI. IBM have a series of models called Granite that's also pretty unfamous, and I think that's kind of ironic given the fact that Granite is itself a rather dreary name. And the other one I would put in that category is Cohere and A121 Labs. Cohere is kind of known as a very robust enterprise model. But outside of, and then I'm just looking at the other ones, there's Hermes as well, which is, I think, more famous in the local AI community. But taking people who are doing this locally, maybe more hobbyists, to the side for a second, we do have some very big models in that list. A121 with their Jamba series, Amazon with their Nova series, and Cohere with their model. So the question that I have really is these other models. Every model takes a substantial amount of resources to bring to market in the first place. So who's using these? Practically speaking, is it kind of enterprises who have very specific compliance or billing requirements or scale requirements? But I guess when I pass these by in the list, and sometimes I try them out just out of curiosity, I kind of think to myself, why do these exist? Like, what would be the reason that someone would go for, using Nova or using Cohere or using, any of the other one, Amazon Nova, for example? Would it purely be because they're in the AWS ecosystem, in which case you could just as easily say, well, you can actually run any model in AWS. Finally, Microsoft Phi Multimodal, which is quite a cool model. The multimodal thing is very useful. But I personally find Gemini Multimodal to be cheaper and far more effective. It's quite a small model series. So you get the idea. There's a whole bunch of, there's a long tail of models out there that is growing longer by the month. And I'm curious to know who is driving the demand for these lesser known of the large language models.
Welcome to My Weird Prompts, the show where we take the deep, the strange, and the highly technical ideas from our producer's mind and try to make sense of them. I am Corn, and yes, for those new to the show, I am a sloth, which means I like to take things at a nice, steady pace. Today we have a fascinating question from our producer Daniel Rosehill. He has been looking at the landscape of artificial intelligence models, specifically through aggregators like OpenRouter, and he noticed something weird.
It is a pleasure to be here. I am Herman Poppleberry, and I am a donkey with a penchant for precision. Daniel is pointing out something that most casual users of artificial intelligence completely overlook. While everyone is talking about the titans like OpenAI or Anthropic, there is this massive long tail of models. We are talking about Amazon Nova, IBM Granite, Cohere, and others that do not get the same level of mainstream buzz.
Exactly. It is like looking at a music chart and seeing the top 10 hits, but then realizing there are thousands of other artists making music that people are actually buying. Why do these models exist? Who is actually using IBM Granite on a Tuesday afternoon? I mean, I can barely keep track of the versions of GPT, let alone something called Nova.
Well, Corn, that is because you are looking at it from the perspective of a consumer who wants a chatbot to write a poem or summarize a meeting. But the world of enterprise technology is a completely different beast. These models are not necessarily trying to be the best at everything. They are playing a different game entirely. They are focusing on things like data sovereignty, specific industry compliance, and deep integration into existing cloud infrastructure.
Okay, but hold on. If I want a sandwich, I go to the place that makes the best sandwich. If Claude or GPT-4 are the best sandwiches, why would I go to the IBM deli for a Granite sandwich? Is it just because I already have a loyalty card there?
That is a bit of an oversimplification, Corn. Sometimes you do not need the best sandwich in the world. Sometimes you need a sandwich that is guaranteed not to have peanuts because you have a massive legal liability if a single peanut enters your building. IBM Granite, for example, is built with a heavy focus on being open and transparent about its training data. For a massive bank or a healthcare provider, knowing exactly what went into the model is more important than whether it can write a funny screenplay.
I do not know, Herman. It feels like a lot of these companies are just chasing a trend. They see the AI gold rush and they think, well, we have servers, we should have a model too. Does the world really need an Amazon Nova if we already have powerful open source models like Llama?
I disagree that it is just trend chasing. Think about the AWS ecosystem. If you are a company that already runs your entire infrastructure on Amazon Web Services, using Amazon Nova is not just about the model quality. It is about billing, security groups, and data staying within your private cloud. You do not have to set up a new contract with a startup or worry about your data leaving your encrypted environment. It is about the plumbing, Corn. The plumbing matters as much as the water.
But is the water actually good? That is what I am getting at. If the model is mediocre, all the fancy plumbing in the world won't make me want to drink it. Are these long-tail models actually competitive in terms of performance, or are they just for people who are stuck in a specific ecosystem?
They are becoming incredibly competitive in specific niches. Cohere, for instance, focuses heavily on enterprise search and retrieval augmented generation. They are not trying to beat OpenAI at creative writing. They want to be the best at looking through 1 million corporate documents and finding the right answer. They are specialists.
I still think there is a bit of a brand name bias here. I feel like if these models were truly game changers, we would be hearing about them more. But maybe we should dive into the specifics of these different players. We have a lot to cover, from the big cloud providers to the specialized industry models.
We certainly do, and I think we need to look at the cost factor too. Some of these models are significantly cheaper to run at scale than the big names. If you are processing billions of tokens, a small difference in price per million tokens adds up to millions of dollars.
That is a fair point. Let's take a quick break for our sponsors, and when we come back, we will look at why a company might choose a model named after a rock instead of the one everyone else is using.
Are you tired of your garden looking like a regular garden? Do you wish your petunias had more attitude? Introducing Glow Grow Bio Sludge. Our patented formula is harvested from the cooling vents of experimental research facilities and delivered straight to your door in a lead-lined bucket. Just pour Glow Grow on your soil and watch as your plants grow 3 times faster and emit a soothing neon green hum that doubles as a nightlight. Side effects may include your lawn developing a basic understanding of French and the occasional spontaneous formation of small harmless weather systems over your gazebo. Glow Grow Bio Sludge. It is what the Earth would want if it were slightly more radioactive. Buy now!
Thanks, Larry. I think I will stick to regular water for my plants. Anyway, Herman, we were talking about the long tail of AI models. You mentioned that cost and ecosystem are big drivers. But let's talk about the open source aspect. A lot of these models Daniel mentioned, like those from Mistral or even some of the IBM stuff, have open weight versions. Does that change the math for developers?
It changes everything. When a model is open weight, a developer can host it on their own hardware. They have total control. They can fine-tune it on their own private data without ever sending that data to an external server. That is a massive deal for sectors like defense, high-frequency trading, or medical research.
But wait, if I can just download Llama 3 from Meta, which is arguably the king of open weights right now, why do I care about the others? Why would I look at something like Mistral or a smaller boutique model?
Because Llama is a generalist. Sometimes you want a model that is pre-trained or fine-tuned for a very specific task. For example, some models are specifically optimized for coding. Others are optimized for low latency, meaning they respond incredibly fast. If you are building a real-time translation app, you might sacrifice a bit of intelligence for a lot of speed. Mistral, for example, gained a huge following because their models were incredibly efficient for their size.
Okay, I can see that. It is like choosing a compact car for city driving instead of a massive truck. But I still struggle with the idea of these massive corporations like Amazon or IBM making their own. It feels like they are just trying to keep people from leaving their platforms. Is there a world where we only have 3 or 4 models that everyone uses?
I actually think the opposite is happening. We are moving toward a world of millions of models. In the future, every large company might have its own proprietary model trained on its own internal culture, documents, and code bases. The long tail we see on OpenRouter today is just the beginning. It is the transition from AI as a rare commodity to AI as a ubiquitous utility.
That sounds like a nightmare for developers. How are you supposed to choose? If I am building an app, do I really want to test it against 50 different models just to see which one handles my specific brand of sarcasm the best?
That is exactly why aggregators like OpenRouter are successful. They allow you to swap models with a single line of code. You can A/B test them in real time. You could have your app use a cheap, fast model for simple queries and then escalate to a more expensive, powerful model like Claude 3.5 Sonnet for the tough stuff. This modularity is what makes the long tail viable.
I suppose that makes sense. It is about having the right tool for the job, but I still have my doubts about whether all these models are actually being used for anything meaningful. Speaking of doubts, I think we have someone on the line who might have a few of his own. Jim, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. This is Jim from Ohio. I have been listening to you two talk about all these fancy model names, and I gotta tell you, it sounds like a bunch of malarkey. Back in my day, If you wanted to calculate something, you used a calculator. If you wanted to write something, you used a typewriter. Now we have got granite and clouds and sloths talking about sandwiches. It is nonsense.
Hey Jim, thanks for calling in. You think the variety of models is just unnecessary complexity?
Unnecessary. It is a circus. My neighbor, Dale, he bought one of those smart refrigerators last year. Now the thing won't let him get his milk unless he updates the software. That is what you are doing with these AI things. You are making it so complex that regular folks can't even get a straight answer. Why do I need a model from Amazon and a model from IBM? It is just more ways for them to get into your pocketbook. And by the way, the weather here is miserable. It has been drizzling for 3 days and my gout is acting up.
Well, Jim, I understand the frustration with complexity, but the reason we have these different models is actually to drive prices down. Competition between IBM, Amazon, and Google means that the cost of using this technology is dropping faster than almost any other technology in history. It is like having 10 different gas stations on the same corner.
I don't care if there are 50 gas stations if I can't figure out how to use the pump. You guys are talking about tokens and latency. I just want to know if the thing works. My cat, Whiskers, he doesn't need a long tail model to know when it is dinner time. He just meows. Why can't AI be more like Whiskers? Just do the one thing you are supposed to do and stop naming yourselves after rocks.
That is a fair point, Jim. The naming conventions are definitely a bit strange, but we appreciate the perspective. Any other thoughts before we let you go?
Yeah, stop talking about sloths and donkeys. It is weird, and tell that Larry guy his sludge ruined my neighbor's prize-winning marigolds. They started glowing blue, and now they won't stop whispering in what sounds like Swedish. It is unsettling. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jim. Always a pleasure. Wow, whispering Swedish marigolds.
Larry really outdid himself this time.
To Jim's point, though, there is a legitimate concern about fragmentation. If every company has its own model, how do we ensure any kind of standard? How do we know if one model is safer or more biased than another? This is why these long-tail models often focus so much on compliance. IBM Granite, for example, specifically markets itself as AI for business with a focus on being legally clean.
Has legally clean. That sounds like something a lawyer came up with to make software sound safe. But I guess if you are a Fortune 500 company, that is exactly what you want to hear. You don't want your AI suddenly quoting copyrighted material or making up medical advice that gets you sued.
Precisely. And let's look at the sovereignty angle. Countries are now realizing that if all their AI processing happens on servers in California, they are at a strategic disadvantage. So you see the rise of sovereign AI. Countries like France with Mistral or even models coming out of the United Arab Emirates and China, they want models that understand their language, their culture, and their legal frameworks.
So it is not just about the tech, it is about politics and power. That makes a lot more sense than just we want to make a better chatbot. It is about who controls the intelligence that runs the economy.
Exactly. And for a developer using something like OpenRouter, having access to those regional or specialized models is huge. If you are building a legal app for the French market, using a model that was trained with a deep understanding of French civil law is going to perform much better than a general model trained mostly on the English-speaking internet.
Okay, I am starting to see the vision. It is a specialized world. But I want to go back to the who is using these part of the question. Is it mostly just big enterprises, or are there actual people like you and me finding reasons to use Cohere or Nova?
For individual hobbyists, it is often about finding the best bang for your buck. If you are running a script that needs to summarize 10,000 articles, you are going to look for the cheapest model that is good enough. They might offer a massive context window for a fraction of the price of the top tier models.
I actually tried that the other day. I had a huge document and I didn't want to spend $5 to have a top tier model read it. I used one of the smaller, cheaper ones and it did a pretty decent job. It wasn't perfect, but for the price of a few cents, I couldn't complain.
That is the commodity phase of technology. We are seeing the depremiumization of intelligence. Not every task requires a super intelligent model. Sometimes you just need a digital intern who can follow basic instructions and doesn't cost a lot. That is where the long tail thrives.
So, as we wrap this up, what is the takeaway for our listeners? If they are looking at that long list of models on a site like OpenRouter, should they just ignore them and stick to the ones they know?
Absolutely not. My advice would be to experiment. If you have a specific task, try it on a few different models. You might find that a model like Cohere Command R is actually better at following your specific formatting than the big names. Or you might find that a smaller model is so much faster that it changes the way you interact with your own tools.
And don't be afraid of the weird names. Whether it is Nova or Granite or something even more obscure, these models exist because they are filling a gap. Whether it is a gap in price, a gap in security, or a gap in regional knowledge.
And remember that the AI field is moving so fast that today's long tail model could be tomorrow's industry leader. The rankings are not set in stone. Innovation often happens in the margins before it hits the mainstream.
Well, I think we have covered a lot of ground today. We have talked about the enterprise need for clean data, the cost-saving benefits of specialized models, and the geopolitical reasons why every country wants its own AI. We even heard from Jim about his glowing Swedish marigolds.
It has been a productive session. I think we have addressed the producer's curiosity. The long tail is not just noise, it is the sound of a maturing industry. It is the sound of AI becoming a part of the infrastructure of everything.
Well said, Herman Popplebury. And thank you to Daniel Rosehill for sending in such a thought-provoking prompt. It really forced us to look past the hype and into the actual mechanics of the AI market.
Indeed, it is always good to look under the hood.
That is all for this episode of My Weird Prompts. You can find us on Spotify and all your favorite podcast platforms. I am Korn, the sloth who likes his AI like his naps, efficient and well-timed.
And I am Herman, the donkey who appreciates a well-structured argument.
Until next time, keep your prompts weird and your marigolds non-radioactive. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.